Clock Verizon time. Today is Thursday, March 12th, and that is the appointed time, and we're at the appointed place, the Tom Baker Meeting Room, for the March meeting of the Renaissance Zone Authority. I'm the chair, Jim Christensen. I see that we have a quorum present, but we will call the roll. Sandra. We have Sue at the parking authority.
That's fine. Greg Zanker.
Here.
Steve Bakken.
Here.
Bernice Dulesky.
Here.
Amelia Dahl.
Here.
Kirsten Dvorak.
Here.
Nancy Guy. Kate Herzog.
Here.
John Lee. Chair Christensen.
Here. So we do have a quorum, and we'll proceed with the meeting. Thank you, everybody. First item of business would be the approval of the last meeting, which was November 13th, 2025. Any comments, questions, changes, corrections?
Move to approve.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
I abstain.
Okay, you can abstain.
Wasn't here.
Oh, that's all right. Bernice abstains. Public comment. Is there anyone here wishing to comment on anything? I don't see anyone. Anyone wishing to comment on anything on our agenda today? If not, we will move on to the regular agenda. Before we do that, I'd like to welcome our newest member, Bernice Dulesky.
Yes.
So, welcome. Do you want to tell the board a little bit about yourself and your glorious background? And tell the public that's eager to learn about Bernice?
I'm not sure what you want. Oh,
About yourself.
I am retired, moved to Bismarck 10 years ago, spent a career in public service as in urban planning and public management. So I'm looking forward to working again in building a community in where I live, and I've always been passionate about downtown areas.
Thank you.
So
Okay.
looking
Welcome.
forward to this.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And for those of you who don't know, Bernice was actually city manager of a fairly large city in Kansas,
I was the deputy county manager
Oh,
of
there you
Johnson
go.
County,
which is a big
Kansas,
county.
outside of Kansas City.
So she knows how to deal with all these rules. All right, we'll move on to item 3 on the regular agenda, which there is no regular agenda, so we'll move on to item 4, other business. 4A is an update on the downtown sections of the Land Development Code. I think Isaac is going to help us with that.
Yes, good
Well,
afternoon,
Isaac.
Chair Christensen and authority members. I hope you all enjoyed your break from meetings over the winter, and now we are getting back into it with something a little out of the ordinary. There are no regular agenda RZ projects or downtown design review projects, but as planning staff are getting closer to finalizing our land development code adoption, just wanted to bring this back to your attention sort of as a reminder or an update or an introduction on some things here. Going to keep this sort of high level. Don't necessarily need specific input from you if you don't feel like you have input at this time, but certainly open to input whenever you might have thoughts, comments, or questions. So just going to keep this fairly high level, going to review some of the existing zoning code in and near downtown, and then get into how that kind of compares to what the new downtown sections would say, and then also review some of the downtown or design review guidelines, as well as an overview of what the proposed guidelines would be, how those might be different. And then I have a couple questions for you for which staff are requesting specific input for food for thought. So first things first, of course, as far as the downtown goes, right now it is just that darker purple and the lighter purple, the darker purple being the downtown core, lighter purple kind of being the downtown fringe. But the reason I have it at this image at this extent is because the downtown is going to shift a little bit in terms of size. It is be a little bigger in terms of what the zoning would call downtown. You'll also notice that it's not necessarily coloring all of the parcels in this case, but rather going along the street frontages. This is because downtown as a whole, most things will be the same regardless for the parcel, regardless of where it is, what street it is on. But there are some things as it pertains to that street frontage and the public realm from the street. There are some details there. So this is sort of combining in some aspects of the downtown streetscape standards, as well as downtown design review, putting it in ordinance a little bit. The colors here are meant to be pretty similar to the streetscape hierarchy that is listed in the downtown streetscape standards. So the orange color there we're calling downtown signature. That's meant to be kind of the most pedestrian friendly, the most pedestrian oriented of streets where you would commonly see shop fronts and things like that. The darker purple is the downtown general. Most districts, I will say, will have pretty similar uses, identical uses with some variations a little bit. The downtown general is the next highest pedestrian-oriented area after downtown signature. The blue or teal color kind of off to the east side there, that is downtown medical, where we have a lot of the hospitals and hospital systems in that area. The lighter purple, downtown fringe, pretty similar to what we have for downtown fringe right now. And then, I don't know if it shows up particularly well on the screens there, but along 7th Street or 9th Street, for example, you'll see some gray there. That's downtown corridor, meaning, we know those are higher traffic streets. We don't expect those to be as pedestrian oriented in nature. So the reason that we have this area for downtown is not by accident. It is not just the whims of us planners, but it does come from our future land use plan. So on the left side here, that is that first image, the existing zoning districts. And that big dashed black line is the boundary of what would become downtown under the tentatively proposed map. On the right-hand side, that's what we saw also, those proposed downtown sub-districts. And so then here, that's overlaid on top of the future land use plan, where that kind of teal green color is what the future land use plan calls as downtown. So this is something that's been established as far as we would expect this area, given trends that we've seen during the comprehensive plan process and the future land use plan process. It was decided at that time during all those public engagement events that, this seems to be the most downtown or likely to turn into downtown in the future. So we're matching up the downtown sub-districts with that. It's not a perfect one-to-one comparison, but it is, mostly there, mostly close. So then getting into some of the lot standards, and this was included in your packets as well. Every district on the current zoning code side of things, that is included here. So we have the downtown core, downtown fringe, the CG commercial, the MA industrial, and the HM health medical. So as you can see, there's quite a bit of variation in terms of minimum lot size. I tried to summarize this well while also capturing that there is variation. There are exceptions to things across the various districts. The 5,000 square feet or 7,000 square feet you see in numerous districts, that is a stipulation in the code right now, depending on when an area was platted. If it was before 1953, it says 5,000 square feet. If it's after 1953, it says 7,000 square feet. Same thing with the lot width you see on some of those districts. That 1953, time boundary. If it's before that, 50 feet. After that, 60 feet. The front yards, some of the, you'll see asterisks along a lot of this. That means exceptions do exist, meaning, for the CG, for example, the standard is 15 feet for a front yard setback, but there are some areas, not necessarily in this area close to downtown, but some areas elsewhere where the code says, well, actually, if it's along this street, it must be 50 feet rather than 15 feet. So trying to summarize while also having some nuance here. But then if you look to the right of the screen on the proposed LDC draft, so as I mentioned, there are some sub-districts. There are some variation between those sub-districts, but in general, we'll see a lot of the similar things across all of them. We are currently proposing no minimum lot size specifically and focusing more on the street frontage. So there will still be a minimum lot width, that 25 feet. That is what a lot of this area was originally platted as, 25-foot lots. So that's why that number was chosen. But in terms of whether the lot would be, 2,500 square feet, 5,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet, we're not focusing as much on that, and we're focusing more so on that street frontage there. Front yard, it depends on the sub-district, but all of these have for front yard, side yard, rear yard. It's really kind of a range of setbacks. In most other districts, especially right now, we would say, okay, here's the minimum front yard setback, for example. If you are at or beyond that, you're good to go. Whereas in the downtown now, we're proposing sort of a range of what's being called a front setback zone or building setback zone to say, put the building somewhere within this zone. You know, you've got your minimum, you've got your maximum. The reason there is a maximum is to try encourage development closer to the street, closer to that front property line to encourage that pedestrian-friendly nature of things. So a lot of buildings in downtown that are existing are up to the property line already. So something like that or similar to that is what this is trying to encourage. The lot coverage, as you can see, a lot of the districts, if it's downtown right now, you're already allowed 100% lot coverage, unless in the downtown fringe, if you are adjacent to a residentially zoned area, it's 70% in that case, not counting alleys or things like that. Other districts, about 80% is fairly common with some exceptions again. But in the proposed downtown, all of the sub-districts would have 100% lot coverage, so there's some uniformity there. And the height limit would depend on that sub-district. 75 feet on the lower end, 130 feet would match the current height limit for downtown zoning districts. And there is a stipulation for some of this that if a building is on a corner lot, for example, and it's on two of those different sub-districts, there's a stipulation in the code that says you can either apply the appropriate sub-district independently if that seems reasonable. But if it's something like building height where you don't exactly want a building 75 feet on this street and 130 feet on this street as an extreme example, we say, okay, whatever is sort of the most intense of the options, you have the option to do that if you, as a property owner, wanted to. The main thing that would be different across a number of the sub-districts is the window space, kind of a minimum amount of window space. Again, that's to try encourage pedestrian-friendly environments, particularly when it comes to retail or service type uses. More window space can encourage more people to either interact with those businesses or encourage the people in the businesses to interact with or at least see the street and the public realm there. So that's a broad overview of that. And feel free to stop me with questions at any time. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going. So then in terms of the uses, a lot of the CG and MA and health medical right now, those non-downtown zoning districts, they're still pretty flexible in terms of the amount of or kinds of residential or commercial uses in the CG and health medical, for example. The MA industrial would currently not permit any types of residential uses in there. Most of the MA zoned area right now is parking lots, so there's not necessarily any worry about either creating nonconformities there or encouraging something that might be put in harm's way if it's next to some other kind of industrial area, because most of it is parking lots at the moment. The CG commercial, as it sounds, it is primarily commercial, but there are multifamily uses that are permitted right now. And I should be clear that in the existing, whether it's CG districts or MA districts, what could be there right now, perhaps it is non-conforming. For example, on the sort of southwest side of what would become downtown in this proposed area, there are a lot of single-family homes in the CG district there. So those are technically non-conforming, legally non-conforming right now. In the downtown, in those sub-districts that would be there, they would come into conformance. So we're trying to tailor the uses within the downtown to be mindful of, okay, are we going to unintentionally make any nonconformities? We want to avoid that. And if there exist legal nonconformities, we want to try bring those back into conformance as much as possible and try eliminate any nonconformities. So within the proposed downtown, we're talking all types of residential uses would be permitted in at least some of those sub-districts. They might not be permitted in all of them, but at least some of them, they'd be permitted in them. Most types of commercial uses would still be allowed, similar to today. When I say most, that just means some of the heavier commercial uses that might be more car-oriented, those would most likely not be permitted, at least in the current draft. We don't know what the final version will be until something is adopted, so that is why we're having all of these inputs from boards and the public. We'll get into the public engagement stuff in a second too. But institutional uses, anything from, government buildings, most types of schools, things like that all is permitted. Hospitals permitted. The only things that really would not be considered institutional that would be not permitted would be cemeteries or detention facilities of some kind. And industrial, I do want to call this out for downtown because it sort of depends on what you consider to be industrial. In this case, when this is sort of a new term we're trying out in our zoning code. So artisanal manufacturing is meant to be stuff that is smaller scale, not causing lots of, any, emissions or gas fumes, things like that. So think, pottery studios or coffee roasters, things like that. So depending on how you define it, maybe it's not industrial in your eyes, but this is how we're defining it at the moment. So certainly nothing that would be considered general industrial. I believe in the packet it said under industrial some storage as well. After further discussion in other meetings, we realized that was a typo, so that is actually not accurate. So limited to artisanal manufacturing is how we're defining our industrial uses that would be permitted in downtown as of right now. And then other uses kind of not necessarily falling neatly into any of these categories, things like larger scale utility infrastructure or transportation infrastructure, such as a bus depot or train terminal or something like that. That sort of stuff already permitted downtown would continue to be permitted in downtown. So that is a broad overview of the uses, again, trying to get the right balance of detailed but also high level still.
Any questions of Isaac on the uses before we get into guidelines, design review? Anybody? Proceed, Isaac. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair Christensen. So again, being high level for the moment, what staff have noticed for the design guidelines is that they are fairly broad. They give guidance, as they say, but they don't necessarily give specificity. So in terms of developers or property owners coming to us and saying, hey, I'm thinking of doing this with my building or with my property, there's a lot of text in there that will say something like, make sure there's active edges. So there's, glass and things, but it doesn't give a lot of specific detail on that. Or create distinguishable, easily identifiable entrances. Sounds great, but again, doesn't necessarily give a lot of guidance beyond that. So what we're trying out in this draft of the code is going to something more like this. We're trying to make it as understandable as possible to the general public, but certainly to a design professional like an architect or urban designer would be able to take a table like this or some of the other guidance and say, okay, if I want to do this type of building in this type of sub-district, I know what my setbacks would be. I know how much, window space to have, any other details there. And so we've planning staff have worked with our design advisors at a couple different stages throughout this process to get their feedback as well. So this is an ongoing conversation as well as we get into some of these details here. So as we get into the actual design review procedures, the part that you all will see the most with this board, as it exists right now on the left side of the screen there, all interior work inside the building is not subject to design review. And then anything outside the building, exterior, if it is a sign, all signage is done administratively by staff, both planning staff and building inspection staff. We make sure it meets the sign criteria, particularly the downtown related components there, and then it can be approved administratively. Things can be appealed to the board or clarifications can be made, but generally speaking, it's all administrative. And then all other work that is exterior and visible from the public right-of-way, that comes to the design review board as of right now. What we are proposing is to create a little more clear shift so that there's a couple categories. The smaller scale projects, especially maintenance type projects, would be done administratively by staff, and then the larger projects would still come before this board. So what is being proposed? Interior work, still exempt. That part is not changing. Stuff that is proposed to be administrative, what we're tentatively calling minor design review. The signs, still administrative. Smaller scale things such as fences or changes to outdoor lighting, routine building maintenance, particularly things that might be one-to-one replacements of things without necessarily changing where, like for example, replacing windows without changing the size of the windows or where the windows are, things like that. That would be considered routine maintenance. Projects that would not be subject to a building permit or other city approval, such as if someone wanted to paint the outside of their building, that doesn't need a building permit, so sometimes we don't even hear about that until it's already done. And if there's no other city approval, such as an encroachment agreement or something like that, staff are proposing, after working with our consultants, to let that be done administratively as well. We're trying to exempt a lot of projects regarding single-family or two-family dwellings. So we're proposing currently any construction or demolition project involving a single or two-family dwelling would be administrative unless that project would involve taking an existing single or two-family dwelling and changing that use from something to something other than a single and two-family dwelling. So maybe changing a single-family home to an office or something like that. That might be done either as a minor or major design review, depending on the scale of it or something like that. Major design review, any new construction project with the usual exemption of a single or two family dwelling, that would still come before this board. Most building additions, particularly larger building additions, would come before the board. Exterior renovations and rehabs visible from the public right-of-way, something that would go above that threshold of just kind of routine maintenance. We're talking more major work being done. That would come before the board like it does today. And then other permanent or semi-permanent streetscape projects, we see outdoor seating come before this board because there's an encroachment agreement involved there as well. That would still come before the board in this, tentative categorization. Demolitions, we'll get to that in a second. That's why the asterisk is there. So demolitions currently come before the board, and we're still proposing they come before the board, but we have staff have some questions for you and would enjoy your input.
So Isaac,
Yes.
you indicated that the design reviewers have reviewed or have bought into this, or at least been part of this process, right?
Yes.
So if we could, before we get the next page, can we pause here for questions or comments on yeah, Kirsten, go ahead.
So my question is, especially like with the public art and where that's kind of it could go either way. I mean, are there going to be guidelines on how they're approved, or is there, those kind of things? I mean, define the public art, because we had the design about the one that off of 2nd Street, right? I mean, we approved that one. So that's my question. Is there is it going to be, what's the decision-making process in that?
Yes, thank you, Authority Member Dvorak, Chair Christensen, and Authority members. Public art was a trickier one because art can be a little more subjective in terms of design. We still, if I'm not mistaken, we still have a definition of public art to say, it can't have logos, trademarks, things like that, things that could be perceived more as advertising, not necessarily art directly. So there are some standards as to what the definition of public art is, but then in terms of the process of it receiving approval, there are some criteria. I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but bringing public art before the board, we could bring it to the full board if that would be the desire of the board, but if you would want to have more criteria on sort of what constitutes approval, that would be something that we would invite further conversation on, because that's definitely something that we as staff have discussed but are open to ideas.
That answer your question, sort of?
I have a question.
Yep.
Well, when we approved the one that was on Second Street, we didn't really have a say in the design, right? It was just more of, yes, this is an appropriate use of this space and we approve it being there. So we don't necessarily have that authority today, right?
That can't be advertised.
Right, but that would be something that wouldn't go away. So I don't see it being a lot different than us sitting here and being like, yeah, it meets all the criteria, and staff doing it as part of their job.
Is the process appealable? If someone doesn't like what staff's decision is, can they appeal it to the full authority?
Yes, there are still appeal processes.
Okay. Kate?
Chair Christensen, authority members, Isaac, the one that sticks out to me is the construction or demo of single or two-family dwelling. But I see there's an asterisk, so I could wait to ask that question. But I know right now you can still get that demo permit through the city, and it doesn't come to us necessarily, except in the core part of the downtown where it potentially would be turned into a parking lot and we lose the taxable value. So that'd be my only thing that I would look at a little bit is, if there's a lot of single-family or two-family demos, like what if they're pulling a bunch of permits or they pull them separately so that they can do that and, kind of get away from the larger process, and then the county, the city, parks and schools lose that taxable value. So that's my only concern, but that's how it's happening currently, so.
Okay.
Thank you, Authority Member Herzog, Chair Christensen, and Authority members. We will get to that a little
Okay.
more, yes.
Okay. Other questions on the procedures? Can we move on? Okay. Continue.
Okay, so some other notes on the procedures before we get to staff's questions for you. So the Renaissance Zone Authority would still act as the voting members of the Design Review Committee for downtown. That's not going to change. We will still have some design advisors. That will not change. The one thing we are proposing is that if a design review related project comes in that is specifically for a property or properties that are on the National Register of Historic Places, we would invite or give the Historic Preservation Commission the authority to appoint a historic advisor to act similarly in the capacity of our standard design advisors to provide guidance on the historic nature of the buildings. The design advisor and the historic advisor would be non-voting, but they would be able to give that input.
Commissioner Zenker?
Chair Christensen, authority members, Isaac. So I think there's already a process for that because at the Historic Preservation Committee, at the end of our portfolios that we get, there's always a list of projects that they review. So I don't know why we would bring another person on to help make that decision if they're already reviewing those projects from the downtown. Unless I'm missing something, it seems to me that there's already a process in place to get the input from the HPC.
So it's being vetted at that level already? is it?
That's how I interpret it, yes, sir.
Okay.
Is it?
Authority Member Zenker, Chair Christensen, authority members, I can certainly talk with my colleague Lauren Oster to make sure that what is happening at the Historic Preservation Commission would meet, their needs and the needs of the Design Review Board in this case. Because of course they are two separate processes usually, but if there's ever a need to either combine them more, we can certainly chat about that, but I can double check with her to see if that would suffice as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on those topics? If not, questions?
So yes, now we get to the fun part. The first question being, should demolitions be included in design review? What criteria should exist for approval? Because as of right now, they do come before the board, but there's not necessarily strict or any criteria to clearly give you guidance as to what constitutes approval or denial. Of course, taxable value is something to think about, but in terms of a property owner doing something with their property, staff cannot, for example, staff cannot, require, the city cannot require someone to build something there. They do have to get the permit from us to demolish something. But as staff have been discussing this amongst ourselves, both planning and building inspection staff, what I can say is that we are open to either leaving the process kind of as is or changing it. And then the second bullet point there is similar, so we can either discuss them at the same time or we can look at them one-on-one.
Let's go one-on-one. Commissioner, you had a question on
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chair
demolition?
Christensen. So I think, isn't it in the current code now that there's a 5-year time frame as to if a property gets demolished that it has to be rebuilt on?
Isaac, do you know the answer? I don't know the answer to that one.
Authority Member Zenker, Chair Christensen, Authority Members, I'm not aware of that in Title 14. If that is in Title 4 or some other part of the city code, I cannot think of it off the top of my head.
Might want to do some research on that, because
Okay.
I think, I can only think of 3 properties that we approved for demolition. One of them was the old Knutson Photography area, strip mall, and then the hotel motel type thing. And I could be wrong, but I thought there was a time frame as to, from the downtown perspective, as to when those properties needed to be.
Another one would be the come and go across from the post office. That's the most recent one.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yep.
correct. So I think I thought there was some, I could be wrong, but you might want to just double check on that.
Well, I think Kate did a good job of delineating things that should be included in criteria for approval, I would think, but what's it going to be replaced with? What's the property tax implications to all the subs?
Chair Christensen, authority members, and there's always things you don't foresee, right? Sometimes you want to you want to demolish a building because there's a health or safety risk, or it's attracting a nuisance of some kind. So I don't want just to be like, I can't do it or whatever. If it's not going to be replaced for a while, I know when George Kaiser was on this board, he was very adamant usually that he wanted to see a plan and didn't want to lose the taxable value. So I'm just throwing it out there that,
Well, here's a good
We
what
will
if.
lose
What
the
if
taxable
the
value.
what if the building inspector comes along and condemns an old house? Does it have to come to us for approval to demolish it, or only to approve what's going to replace it? I don't know the answer.
Is that a specific question, Chair Christensen, or a
Sure,
or a
sure,
musing?
Isaac, run with it.
Yeah, what would happen if that, if it gets condemned?
So under the current process right now, regardless of whether it is a public entity that is condemning a building, or if someone wants to demolish a property of their own volition, we do have a process for having the demolition permit, and there's some things to be met within Title 14. Usually not 14, but definitely Title 4 in terms of dealing with the foundation and things like that. But the criteria for approval is just making sure there's a plan in place on where to take the materials, making sure they're taking an appropriate route to wherever their disposal ground may be. And unfortunately, no member of the building inspections staff is here to correct me if that is a mischaracterization.
But is the design review board involved in that process? Probably not, right?
Only if it is within the downtown,
Yeah.
as of right now.
Right. Yeah. Okay, other questions or comments? Let's move on to Title 14, landscaping and grassing demolished lots.
So yes, this next question is related. It's still on the topic of demolitions, but it is a little more specific in this case. So there is a detail in Title 14 right now that was not included in the current draft of the code. That was not necessarily intentionally omitted, but when staff noticed that it was omitted, we're already in the process of having public conversations on things. So here we are today to get your input on this. This particular part relating to demolitions within the downtown says that if a property is demolished and is going to remain vacant for more than 60 days, then it must be landscaped or grassed or mulched in some way. And again, this has not been added into the LDC right now. Is this something that the authority would like to still see? Because staff can see this going both ways in some regards. Because this is applied to all properties within the downtown equally as of right now. If it is a house, for example, that is in the downtown fringe and it's mostly grass around it, it could make sense to grass that remaining area if it will remain vacant for a while. But for if a property on Main Street, for example, was demolished and it's all concrete, all foundation right now, would it make sense for that area to have the foundation fully taken out, grassed, and then have a foundation be put back in at some undetermined point in the future when a building goes back up? Again, planning staff have discussed this with building inspection staff, including the building official, and we are open to amending Title IV as well as Title 14 to sort of meet whatever intent is deemed appropriate. According to the building official, and again, I hope I am not mischaracterizing his words because he is not here, he has stated that his primary concern would be general health and safety, so that if, for example, a building had a basement as part of it, we wouldn't want just a hole in the ground that someone could trip into or something like that. But if it were kind of a slab on grade foundation, there is less concern there about that remaining, either if it can be reused partially or fully for the next building, or a little easier to adjust that as needed for construction, as opposed to making people tear all that out and then put something back in later. So those are just some thoughts that we as staff have had, and are open to any thoughts that you may have now or in the future.
Questions from the authority members?
Thanks, Chair Christensen. Where did the 60 days come from originally? Like, how did that come into existence?
Authority Member Dahl, Chair Christensen, and authority members, I am not sure on the history of that specifically. And as you maybe have noticed, Daniel, Planning Director Daniel Nairn, is also not here. So he may know the history of that, but I do not know off the top of my head.
Because realistically, 60 days isn't a lot of time unless you're going to go right into it. I do think that there needs to be something, kind of what you were saying, that's a little more nuanced about, okay, it was mostly a parking lot. Ripping all of that up and putting grass maybe isn't appropriate, but there needs to be some way to make it not a public health hazard.
And make it a little more attractive than a...
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, Commissioner Bakken.
Actually, the bigger concern for me is when you're looking at these as one-off projects, by taking a building down, especially in the core, what are you doing to the water conveyance? So if you're requiring somebody to put in a grass lawn, you're changing up the water, you're causing a leak issue to the adjacent building now, because you've got moisture that can now travel along some of those foundations. So that's the bigger concern for me, is what are we intrinsically doing to the adjacent properties by requiring something? So if staff can look into that, I would like a better answer on that, because if there's also already a partial foundation or slab on grade, it makes more sense to leave it as such rather than now you're opening that up to water leakage into the adjacent properties.
Good question. Other questions or comments? Yeah. David, technical advisor, you have anything you want to jump in on? You've been pretty quiet back there. Unusually quiet.
Sure. Yeah. I have a couple of pretty specific stuff that I don't know if we want to get into. It might be something we just talk about offline. Isaac, I think one thing that's worth mentioning here is this is being integrated into the zoning code document, which I think means it will trigger engagement sooner in the process than I think we've seen at times, where this is like the last thing somebody needs before they get their building permit, and it becomes really tough to push back at that point on any kind of design. I can think of one project in particular where it would have been nice to have had a little bit more dialogue, but it was kind of like too late in the process. So this should, and can you confirm this, Isaac, that this gets reviewed at the site plan stage of a application?
Design advisor David Witham, Chair Christensen, and authority members, yes. Most any project that would be happening in downtown would go through our site plan process. Any project that is not, in the residential building code, for example, so a house or a two-family dwelling, once you get into those more commercial buildings or larger scale multifamily, that will automatically trigger our site plan process, in which either during that or during the building permit stage, yes, we would see more of these details. So staff can confirm a lot of this ahead of time, and we would be able to hammer out some of the trickier details before it comes to the board, in theory, anyway.
Makes sense. Other questions or comments of Isaac while we've got him? Kate?
Chair Christensen, authority members, I think one thing about demolition that we've talked about for, 10 years is in the code, or in code enforcement, a lot of things aren't necessarily, we don't have a bunch of building officials going around, looking at rentals, essentially, like Grand Forks or Fargo, and so they're probably, it's years and years of things that probably should have been updated, maybe, and it's only by kind of a complaint basis that they get looked at, and so obviously we're dealing with that there, but I think that's really what kicks in a lot of the demolitions is, the Budget Inn, for example, had, I think, a lot of environmental issues, but unless you get a complaint from the tenant, it's not looked at, and then it gets to the point where it is not savable anymore, so we've talked about that for 10 years, but I feel like that's what brings in a lot of the demolition discussion is it's gone too long without being looked at.
And that's probably beyond our ken. We've got other items on the agenda, but Isaac wants to take us through the next 40 pages, line by line. That shouldn't take more than 3 or 4 hours, probably.
And I have it all memorized right up here.
What action would you like the authority to take today?
So, Chair Christensen and authority members, staff doesn't necessarily need a specific motion or anything, but certainly want to have this in your minds. So as you're thinking about things, if you have other questions or thoughts that you think could be a good idea for the downtown, feel free to send them my way or to planning staff so that everyone is aware. There will be other opportunities for not only yourselves, but the public in general to provide input on this. We had a public open house last night at the Public Works Building on April 15th. There will be another one at the library. I believe that one it's either from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. or 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. I'm not 100% sure, but that will be April 15th at the library. And of course, this would go before the Planning and Zoning Commission, the City Commission as well. So we're still really kicking off the main public process on this. So that's the main reason why staff is bringing this to you today.
So you've explained the next steps. I appreciate that. But will at some point this body be asked to vote to approve this?
Not specifically, no.
All right. Okay. So you're looking for feedback more?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Anything else on this subject? Did you have anything else on this today, Isaac?
I do not know. Thank you, Chair.
Awesome. All right. We will move on to agenda item 4B, which is a discussion about the Renaissance Zone program boundaries. Well, Isaac's back.
Happy to see you all again. So, Chair Christensen and authority members, this is something that the Renaissance Zone Development Plan calls for an annual review of the boundary of the program. Adjustments or boundary changes are not required to be made, but it is a goal of the plan to review it annually just to see in case. So what I have on the screen here momentarily is the result of an analysis that staff did on a block-by-block basis where there are some criteria outlined within the plan itself, and staff used, you've seen some of this before. A lot of the criteria was used before. There was one other criteria that was added in, if we can get the laptop. There we go. Fantastic. So this was also included in your packets as well, along with a memo kind of describing this. But on a block-by-block basis, staff looked at what is the median building value of the block, or median building condition, I should say, of the block, of blocks that are near the Renaissance Zone boundary but not within the boundary right now. So median building condition, median building age, distance from the zone, the land to value ratio, building to land value ratio, and the one criteria, and assessed value over time. That's the one I'm forgetting. The change in assessed value over time from, I believe, 2017 to now, when one of the last times a major review of this was done. And then, so 5 of the 6 criteria that staff used, we used previously last year during an initial discussion. There was one criteria that staff included this time that was not included last time, and that is how much of the block is currently vacant right now, whether that means vacant but is grass or yard or something, or vacant as in a parking lot, or vacant as in there's no building but also no parking lot. Anything that is not a structure was considered vacant in this case. So higher percentage of the block being vacant was used as an indicator of it could be a good candidate for the Renaissance Zone to encourage either building additions or new buildings on these properties. Lower land value or building value, another criteria that could be seen as a higher need for the program. And older buildings, higher need. Lower building quality or what's the word I'm looking for? Condition. Thank you, Authority Member Herzog. So that is all to say that, as a reminder, the authority can change the boundary if they so desire or recommend. It wouldn't be, the decision would not only be with you, but the total number of blocks is based on the population of the community. And there's a slight asterisk in terms of the numbers I gave for the memo. So it is 34 blocks plus another block for every 5,000 population over 5,000 as the initial threshold. It depends on if you use, for us, we have a total of either 47 or 48 blocks available, depending on if you use the last census, when our population was above 70,000 but below 75, or if you go off of the more recent American Community Survey estimates, in which we are above 75,000. So regardless, we have either 5.5 blocks of open space that we could bring in, or 6.5 blocks of space that could be brought in. Staff is not necessarily recommending any specific blocks to be brought in. The only recommendation staff has is that blocks that are currently in the program, we do not recommend closing any blocks, because once a block is closed, it cannot be brought back into the program at a future date.
And we've not had a history, we don't chase projects, but has there been inquiries or requests by anyone outside to add their block or blocks?
There have been a couple in the last year or so. A few projects, a couple were in blocks that staff soon learned used to be in the program but were closed. One that is in a block that is within this area that was shown as being close to and therefore included in this analysis, but I will not say specifically which block that is. And then some other general inquiry for blocks that are already inside the program. So there's been a little bit of everything so far, anyway.
Questions of Isaac on this topic? It's something that comes up frequently, but we haven't really taken any action or even recommended any action to add or close blocks. For those who might be new to the table, what's the simple process if we wanted to add a block?
So if the board wanted to recommend adding in a block, there would need to be block or blocks. There would need to be a public hearing starting first with this board. We would send out notifications to the potentially affected property owners, including those within the block. And then if, as a result of the public hearing before this board, that were approved, it would then need to be approved by all of the other taxing subdivisions in the community. So that would mean city commission, county commission, school board, and park board in whatever order they have their next meetings. Because a change to the boundary of the Renaissance Zone is considered a change to the development plan.
So ultimately, it also has to go to the Department of Commerce.
Yes, it also has to go to the state. Thank you.
For the final blessing. Okay. Any questions? Anybody on that matter? Thank you, Isaac. I think we're done with you, unless you want to run for office. Other business 4C is election of officers. Didn't we just do this? Apparently not. So I guess the procedure would be to open the floor for nominations for officers. And the officers are chair and vice chair. We don't have a secretary treasurer. We don't, right? I mean, it's just the two. Does that sound right? Isaac's nodding.
Yeah, yes, that is correct.
Just
Chair and vice chair is what is on the table.
And the term is a year, or is it for life?
No, it's pretty much like.
For you, Joe.
Thanks.
Who's to say?
So are there any nominations for officers?
I nominate Jim Christensen as the chair.
I second.
Okay, you want to take them one at a time? Okay, that's fine. Are there any other nominations for chair?
I'll make a motion to close nominations.
Okay. Do we have to vote on the motion, or can we just vote on, I mean, the
You can vote
closure?
on the motion to close. So I'll second his closure.
All in favor of closing the nomination, say aye. Opposed,
Aye.
same sign. That motion carries. All in favor of the nomination for chair, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you very much.
I'll make a motion for Kristen Dvorak to be the vice chair.
Good.
Second.
Okay. Any further nominations? Hearing none, we'll just close the nominations. We don't need to vote on that. All in favor of Kristen being the vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Same sign. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Congratulations. Good. Good.
She didn't even see or hear it coming.
It'll sink in later, believe me.
It pays the same, by the way.
And thank you for that. And then speaking of other business, I'll see if anybody has any, but, and past members, Joe Fink served 9 years. He's probably not watching, but maybe he is. And he gets a nice certificate of appreciation from this body for his 9 years of service on the Renaissance Authority. What am I gonna get? 20 years. What do
Slightly
you get?
thicker paper.
Maybe a tombstone? All right. Anyway, we want to acknowledge and thank Joe for, he was very active and influential and important member of the Renaissance Zone, but he has moved on to other things. So thank you, Joe, if you're watching. Other business, anybody? Anybody have any other business? If not, and if there's no objection, we will stand adjourned until the next meeting, which is April 9th. Thanks, everybody, for your participation.